You're not being persuaded. You're being triggered. You believe you're making choices. You assume your logic is in charge. But all it takes is one emotional trigger, and your system takes over. But here's what really happens. Someone touches a nerve, and your nervous system writes the script. You feel hurt. You shut down. You feel unseen. You over-explain. You feel judged. You lash out. And all of it feels justified. Justification isn't clarity. It's just rehearsed behavior with a better excuse. Most people aren't manipulated by facts. They're steered by feeling. Not logic, not reason. Just a glance, a pause, a question wrapped in tone. And suddenly, you're acting in ways you swore you outgrew. That's not communication. That's emotional hijack. They don't need to overpower you. They just need to access what still makes you flinch. And once they know where to press, they don't argue. They activate. You call it overthinking. But it's just your nervous system trying to make sense of a moment it no longer controls. So ask yourself, how many of your reactions are actually choices? Because if you can't answer that, you're not immune. You're just conditioned. How emotion becomes a control system. They don't need to overpower you. They just need to make you feel something. Because once they do, you run the program for them. Here's how the system works. Emotion enters. You skip the pause. You move. You speak. You explain. You justify. You think it's instinct. It's not. It's installation. That feeling of being disrespected, they know it'll trigger your anger. That subtle exclusion, they know it'll trigger your need to prove. That passive comment, they know it'll activate your insecurity. And once activated, you react like clockwork. No strategy, no delay, just exposure. They don't need logic. They just need leverage. And emotion, unfiltered, unexamined, is leverage. It bypasses logic. It floods your system. And worst of all, it wears your voice. You say, I had to say something. I couldn't stay silent. It hit a nerve. Yes, that's the point. It hit a nerve. Because you never built a firewall around it. Emotion is not the enemy. It's a signal. But signals, when acted on instantly, become control. Every unprocessed emotion becomes a backdoor. And someone, consciously or not, will walk through it. This is how it hides. It doesn't tell you what to do. It just makes you feel intensely enough that doing anything else feels wrong. That's not intuition. That's programming. You weren't built for constant reactivity. You were built to notice, to feel, to decide. But now, you're not deciding. You're defending. Defending emotion as if it were truth. Defending reaction as if it were choice. But cold mind knows. Emotion is input, not instruction. And until you separate the two, you're not protected. You're accessible, hackable, predictable. You don't need to numb out. You just need to stop letting unfiltered feelings become public code. Because the system isn't personal, it's structural. And emotion is the interface. Signs you're being controlled by emotion without realizing it. So if emotion can hijack your system, how do you know it already has? The problem is, you won't feel hijacked. You'll feel justified. You'll feel real. You'll feel right. That's how it works. It convinces you your reaction was a decision, when really, you never paused long enough to choose anything. Here are the signs. 1. You clarify quickly because silence feels unsafe. No one asked, but you feel misunderstood, so you start talking. Clarifying, overcompensating. Not for truth, but for emotional relief. 2. You don't replay the moment. You replay the emotion. You go back and edit the script in your head. You add better lines. You analyze tone. You relive tension. But what you're really doing is rehearsing a feeling you didn't know how to release. 3. You rename reactivity as honesty, because ownership exposes you. You explode. You cut someone off. You drop the silence like a weapon. Then you say, "That's just how I am." Number. That's just how emotion got through unfiltered. 4. You regret, but not enough to change. So you protect the version that acted. You know you went too far, but instead of correcting, you justify. Because owning the loss of control hurts more than pretending you meant it. And that's how emotion controls you. Not with commands, but with impulse that looks like choice. You're not weak. You're just trained to trust the first feeling and call it a fact. But once you see this pattern, you're no longer inside it. You're outside, with the power to pause. And that's where immunity begins. Emotion is a signal, not a command. You've been taught to listen to your feelings, but no one told you what that really means. Listening doesn't mean obeying. Not every feeling is a fact. Not every impulse deserves action. Because emotion is a signal, not a command. It's an alert. It says, something shifted. Something matters. Something got touched. That's all. The problem begins when you treat that alert like an order. You feel disrespected and speak before thinking. You feel anxious and abandon your plan. You feel hurt and lash out or shut down. But none of that was conscious. It was emotion writing code without verification. Imagine a notification on your phone. Would you answer every pop-up just because it blinked? Of course not. But that's what most people do internally. They act on the first emotional ping without ever asking, is this valid? Is this mine? Is this urgent? Cold mind doesn't silence emotion. It runs it through logic. It pauses. It verifies. It chooses. Because not every feeling was meant to become a behavior. Some were meant to be observed and released. And once you break that link, emotion to reaction, you stop being predictable. You stop being programmable. You feel everything, but you respond from clarity, not from charge. And that's where immunity begins, when emotion informs, but no longer controls. Cold immunity. 3 strategic steps to feel without reacting. You don't need to feel less. You just need to stop letting feelings become commands. That's what cold immunity is. The ability to feel without losing control. Here's how to build it. 3 steps. Tactical. Repeatable. 1. Notice without ownership. The first emotion that hits you is never neutral. It's fast, charged, unfiltered. That's fine. Let it rise. But don't wear it. Just say, this is sensation. This is not a signal to act. Label it, observe it, but don't adopt it. Because once you own the emotion, it owns your behavior. 2. Delay before decision. Your nervous system has a timer, and the first few seconds are always unstable. So build the pause. 30 seconds, 2 minutes. Long enough to separate pressure from purpose. No replying, no explaining, no reacting. Silence isn't retreat. It's recalibration. Because clarity never comes inside the first emotional wave. 3. Respond from protocol, not pulse. Most people wait for calm before they respond, but cold mind doesn't wait. It installs protocol. What do I do when this happens? Answer that in advance, then run it. You feel triggered? Exit. You feel disrespected? Pause. Urgency is distortion by default. You're not suppressing emotion. You're just refusing to build your identity around it. This is cold immunity. You don't numb. You don't react. You run system logic in real time, and that makes you unpredictable, untouchable, unhackable. Final message. Emotion doesn't need to disappear. It just doesn't drive. Don't silence emotion. Just revoke its license to lead. Emotion was never the problem. The problem was mistaking emotion for instruction. You can feel everything and still remain unreadable. Still, clear, unaffected in behavior. That's not apathy. That's strategy. Because cold mind doesn't kill emotion. It just removes it from the driver's seat. The world will keep trying to pull reactions out of you. Through tone, through silence, through pressure. But if they can't trigger movement, they can't control outcome. When you stop bleeding signal through every word, glance, and tone, you disappear from the target map. You become unreadable and therefore untouchable. That's cold immunity, not because you don't feel, but because you feel fully and still choose clarity over noise. That's not resistance, that's freedom. In the next video, we'll go deeper into emotional blackmail, how guilt is weaponized against you, and how to make your nervous system untouchable. Subscribe. Feel deeply. React never. Stay sovereign.